Okay.
In every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
You can't handle the truth.
And welcome, folks. This is July 22nd, and you're watching Truth versus News Incorporated. And by golly, we picked the right title here, I think, because it is that way. Truth versus this garbage that they're putting forth. And we're putting forth some fantastic things here with the most dynamic and dangerous mind in America, Jim Fetzer, who's written some books that have been banned. I have some of them right here. And these are some of the books, like Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. And he has Nobody Died at Boston either. And how about, and I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. I think this is one that is right timely right now, since we just had the 50th
Very timely, yes.
50th anniversary. And Scott has written a book also about Shell Game, which is just hits it right on the head with the Epstein thing. They're here for the very timely things that only we can show you what's really happening. So go for it. Let's shoot the moon here, Jim.
Shoot the moon, indeed, Don. Why do so many Americans believe the moon landing was fake? Well, because it was fake. It's unbelievable. The best place to start is conspiracy theory. Did we land on the moon? My wife and I were in London in 2001, staying at the Morgan Hotel on Bloomsbury Street, which I had selected because Morgan was her maiden name. It backs onto the British Museum. I turned on a BBC channel to see this fascinating program, a documentary about the moon landing with one scientific proof after another. You got a flag that's waving in a moon that has no atmosphere. You have no blast crater beneath the lander. You have the lander taking off as though it's being yanked by a cable. It was stunning. Because of my background in the history and philosophy of science, I was hooked. Now we know today, of course, the Van Allen radiation belts make manned missions to the moon impossible. In fact, NASA even admitted that it was a principal obstacle to a manned mission to Mars, but it's not a novelty. The Van Allen radiation belts have been here as long as Earth, or approximately 4.5 billion years. So if it would make a difference to future space travel, it obviously made a difference to past, where estimates have it, it would require 6 feet of lead to protect the astronauts to pass through the Van Allen radiation belt, which would have been a preposterous payload to get off of the surface of Earth. We've never been beyond low Earth orbit. Experts claim that the lunar rocks disprove the fake moon landing bot. It turns out that Werner von Braun conducted an expedition to the Antarctic in 1967 to collect moon rocks that had been dislodged from the surface of the moon by the impact of small asteroids caught in Earth's gravitational field and brought down to Earth so they could be presented as bona fide, genuine moon rocks. Only they'd not made their trip to Earth by the mode of transportation alleged. You can see the key to the success of the deception of single grainy feet. This was already exposed in the film 1977 Capricorn 1 about a manned mission to Mars, where James Brolin, Sam Waterston, and O.J. Simpson play the astronauts. Hal Holbrook, the NASA director, who intercepts them just as they're about to launch into orbit, explained they discovered a flaw in the program. They would have died in re-entry, takes them to a distant remote location in the Mojave, all set up with a sound stage where they fake it. using a single grainy feed, which is exactly what happened in 69, 70. If you want to see how bad it was, how the spacesuits were actually costumes. Look on the left, you have Buzz Aldrin with a big helmet, short legs, long arms, and a chest area with set of controls at the right. Then in another, we have Buzz with short arms, longer legs, smaller helmet, different chest controls. Judging from the red spot, they were taken at about the same location as anyone believed. Buzz Aldrin changed his spacesuit on the moon. Meanwhile, NASA, this is one of the greatest tells of all, in 2016 reached out to ask the public to help solve its space poop problem and win $30,000. It turns out the space diapers that NASA's had available to handle human excrement were only good for 24 hours. But the missions to the moon have taken 7 or 8 days, which is really a way of telling us the whole program of having flown to the moon is nothing but a gigantic pile of space poop. So did we go to the moon? We didn't have the propulsion power. We didn't have the computing capacity. We didn't have the communication ability. Another striking tell is in communication between Houston and the astronauts purportedly on the moon, 250,000 miles approximately. There's no delay. It's a communication as they were talking by telephone in a local distance right here on the surface of Earth, which they were doing. Photographic anomalies, all of Jack Whitey discovered that if you total up the number of photographs allegedly taken at the moon, divided by the number of minutes, we were taking a photograph every 50 seconds, which is preposterous. Not only that, but every one of those photographs is perfectly focused and framed. And yet the cameras were external to the spacesuits, and the astronauts could neither focus nor frame them. I also believe that it would have been impossible to do photography on the moon because cosmic rays would have interfered and destroyed the photographic plate. The place to begin conspiracy theory, did we land on the moon? For more detailed and exact analysis, the Great Moon Landing Hoax, an interview I did with Dennis Camino and a sequel, The Real Deal, the Moon Landing Hoax, you can find it 153news.net. NASA has admitted itself the problem of going to Mars is the Van Allen radiation belt. Believe it or not, they found hundreds of hours of moon landing footage in a basement in Pittsburgh and destroyed it. That makes no sense at all. If this was bona fide, real, the most precious ever taken by the hand of man, they were worried new techniques would enable us to expose it was fake. The space boot problem, 24 hours versus 8 days. Van Braun leading an expedition to the Antarctic to gather moon rocks. Even National Geographic has done stories about it. In December of 1969 on the left, the Apollo moon landing, the photograph of Buzz Aldrin. But look, more recently, critics have generated, they're talking about the war on science, suggesting it was actually shot on a soundstage with a lander. That was a model and a fake, which is getting it right inadvertently and ironically. If you want to see more, go to the moon landing hoax, how we know we didn't go to the moon, take 2, which I published on the 50th observance of moon landing hoax day. I think 50 years of a moon landing hoax is 50 years too many. Scott?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. It's one of the greatest deceptions that allegedly has ever passed over the American eyes. And I think with all the technology and the internet and the wealth of data and material and film clips and photographs and other things that are emerging to the surface, you have the stuff of civil wars. You have the stuff of massive, insurrections and social upheavals when you tell a people in a society that their entire NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and all of these adventures and all of this money that the budgets have allegedly taken has been used for special effects and most likely a psyop to try and persuade the enemies, allegedly the enemies of the United States, that our technology is superior and that with this ability we've got other abilities that can translate into military action and things like that. Just like Star Wars in the 1980s when they were trying to impress upon the Russians, the Soviet Union, Gorbachev, and the rest that the missile defense system of Reagan's SDI, the Space Defense Initiative, was existent and would destroy any Soviet activity. And it's funny, I think Trump is resurrecting the same dead horse with this Space Force, allegation or a promise, which I think, just has too much of a resembling of SDI and this other space thing. So it'll be interesting if it comes out. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, well, I think the evidence is simply overwhelming, and that the American people deserve to know the truth. Trump's attack on the squad continued. These are the four progressive Democrats: Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar, describing their recent comments as vile. The Democratic congresswomen have been spewing some of the most vile, hateful, disgusting things ever said by a politician, he tweeted Tuesday, continuing his attacks on the squad. He accused them of being horrible anti-Israeli, anti-U.S. pro-terrorists. Shortly before a press conference, he tweeted they were pro-Al-Qaeda. I've been quite a fan of Ilhan Omar, but as we shall see, when she fails to condemn the Antifa terrorist attack in Portland, and when she goes on this rampage about Trump, she's squandering her credibility. Here's a very interesting piece by a fellow named Nick Pilgrim, about whom you will learn more right now. Trump may be the least racist, most colorblind president in history. Liberal politicians use two go-to tactics to appeal to voters. They offer free stuff in exchange for votes, such as Obamacare and free college, and they accuse anyone who disagrees with them of being a racist. Given this political reality, it's hardly surprising that with the 2020 elections fast approaching, prominent Democrats have been bombarding the public with generous offers to redistribute other people's wealth while constantly accusing their opponents of racism. According to one hyperventilating author, Trump's go-back tweets leave no room for doubt. He must be a racist. Others have gone so far as to claim anyone who supports Trump or votes for him is a racist. But as a former federal prosecutor who happens to be black, I see ample room to doubt both of these histrionic allegations. First, sad to say, liberals have falsely leveled accusation of racism so often, so frequently, reasonable doubt naturally exists whenever they accuse a conservatism of racism. It's the boy who cried wolf syndrome. When people are called racist simply for believing that illegal aliens who commit serious crimes should be deported, or for wanting our national anthem to be respected, or for calling out left-wing politicians who minimize the destruction caused by Al-Qaeda, the label racist becomes diluted. By defining racism downward, solely to score political points and virtue signaling, liberals have created plenty of room to doubt both their sincerity and their accuracy whenever they smear their adversaries as racist. Second, Trump's tweets were undeniably directed at congresswomen who have falsely accused our nation of torturing innocent children in concentration camps while championing destructive ideologies like socialism. One of his targets even claimed she was ashamed of the U.S. for continuing to live in its hypocrisy. Curiously, few mainstream media cover the fact that the United States Congresswoman openly declared herself ashamed of our country. The president's comments were clearly focused on anti-American viewpoints expressed by the progressive congresswomen, not their race or the color of their skin. Third, a strong case can be made that when you judge politicians by their actions, not simply by their rhetoric, President Trump is the most colorblind president in history. Based on his actions to date, it's undeniable he will embrace anyone, regardless of their color or family origin, if that person loves the U.S. and shares his view that our nation is the greatest country on earth. On the other hand, if you insult the United States or disrespect our nation's flag or anthem, President Trump will have a problem with you, whether you are white, like soccer athlete Megan Rapinoe, who won the world's cup for the U.S. team as a major player, or identify as black, like former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, whom I happen to personally like a lot. At the end of the day, the only colors that appear to matter to the president are red, white, and blue. For this reason, conservatives should not fall into the liberal media's trap by playing the was what Trump said racist game. Meanwhile, a third of Democrats believe any white politician who criticizes a politician of color is a racist. Look at the new definition, racist noun, a white person. On Wednesday, Rasmussen released a very disturbing poll that found 1 in 3 Democrats think it's racism anytime a white politician criticizes the politician of color. Well, 80% of Democrats believe the president is a racist. 85% of Republicans think the racism charges by opponents are politically motivated. Voters not affiliated with each or major party are evenly divided. And this is crucial because in the electorate, we have about 1/3 Republican, about 1/3 Democrat, and 1/3 more or less in the middle who are going to decide the outcome of our elections. 32% of Democrats, however, say it's racist for any white politician to criticize the political views of a politician of color. That's a view shared by just 16% of both GOP and unaffiliated voters. Scott, rather fascinating situation shaping up here.
Yeah, by the way, when I was growing up, I always heard the saying, America, love it or leave it. I don't think there's any color in there. And so that's an old time saying. And so I think it still applies, right?
Well, Ilhan Omar and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and the other Palestinian woman, whatever, Palestinian American, who said we're going to impeach the MFer. You know, these are very vile Skigsian witches, the most unattractive and you know, just disturbing and unappealing voices you can imagine. They're full of venom. They're full of bitterness. They're full of betrayal. They're full of fantasy. They're full of this violent, angry agenda of using government force and tyranny and oppression and causing pain through taxes and regulation. They're typical fascist, totalitarian women that have all sorts of social, mental issues going on, whether it's Ocasio-Cortez living with a man or sleeping with him and not married. There's a total dysfunctionality there. The Palestinian woman allegedly divorced and she's got a kid. There's something wrong there. The black woman who was in the mix, who was saying we don't need black voices saying non-black things or brown voices saying non-brown things. I mean, the level of idiocy that can even tolerate or entertain those statements or anything and interpret them as reasonable is absolutely laughable. It's sad because it shows this country really is descending very quickly into a condition of violence and chaos and civil war. And we don't as conservatives, we don't start civil wars. We don't take civil wars. We respond to oppression, to violence, to abuses against us, our family, our property. And in that response, we throw off the acts of tyranny. It's like Charlton Heston said, they'll get my gun when they pry it from my cold, dead fingers. And they'll have a few taken out dead in the process. I think conservatives are recognizing this, and they're siding with Donald Trump. I'm glad in a way that it's going in a positive direction, because I was like you, Jim. We talked about this. This was concerning because Trump, of course, stuck his foot in his mouth and jumped out and wasn't very articulate and was kind of a little bit blustery. And the media tried to pounce on it, but the venom and the viciousness of these women sort of overshadowed Trump's perceived bullying and loudness. They're even worse. And that's a good thing for Trump, because they're so bad, because they're so hateful, because they're so deceitful, because Cortez goes down to the border and invents total lies and puts herself against ICE and the Border Patrol and the police. Look, the American people side with ICE and the Border Patrol and the police and the military that keep them safe. They don't want hundreds of thousands of immigrants, migrants, refugees, or people claiming such to flood into the country, flood their children's schools, flood the schools with diseases, which we now see breaking out, and taking away jobs and opportunities for employment, and lowering the wages all the way around the country. That's what slave wages do. So these women have, I think, essentially brought more people to Trump's side, and I think that will continue. He's got to be careful how he articulates, so he can't be perceived as a misogynistic, racist person. But he's not. You're right. He doesn't have any racist bones in his body, and it's good that he has a variety of minorities around him in the background, and that he really does represent the American dream. That's why he is so passionate about the military, to a fault, I would say, because he is often buying the lies of the military and lies of the Bolton types, and this delusion of a parade, James Cagney, MacArthur returning from World War II with ticker tapes. That's a very dangerous type of delusional patriotism, because now you're thinking, well, we just need to go anywhere in the world and pick a fight and we'll win, and everyone will bow down to us and we'll be the American empire controlling the world. No, there's a lot of possibilities, and if you pull the wrong pin, that you run the risk of the entire military in America going into a war that it can't recover from. And Trump is in dangerous areas of that. So, but on this little battle with the four Skigsian witches, I think he's attracting more people than he is repelling them. Jim?
Aren't they more like hyper racist, these four? It seems like everything is race, and that's just putting race first.
This is where I'm saying it's getting serious for these women. Ocasio-Cortez, Omar Presley all refused to condemn Antifa terror attack on ICE facility. This is going to be very discrediting of them. Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Presley all refused to answer the question put before them. Will you condemn a terrorist attack on an ICE facility? On Saturday, Wilhelm von Sponson, a self-identified, according to his manifesto, member of the left-wing Antifa movement, was shot and killed when he stormed an ICE center in Tacoma. Von Sponson was armed with flares and a rifle, attempted to ignite a propane tank, burn the center down, published a manifesto echoing Ocasio-Cortez and her incendiary concentration camp rhetoric. Omar won't condemn it either. No surprise there. Omar is the same person who is unable to answer questions such as, are you a communist and do you support Al-Qaeda? Antifa, meanwhile, urges others to take direct action after a martyr was taken down by police for a failed firebomb plan. A self-proclaimed Antifa activist was shot and killed by Washington State Police Saturday after the 69-year-old man launched an attack on an Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention center in Tacoma. Instead of condemning the crazed man's act of violence, which could have resulted in serious injury or death, Antifa Seattle faction posted a call to action for others to follow Wilhelm von Sponson's footsteps, labeling their comrade a martyr, urging direct action. The problem here is he wasn't just some punk armed with a spray can, paint can. According to the Blaze, he showed up packing a rifle and was armed with improvised explosive devices. He was allegedly upset about a factually inaccurate portrayal of the holding facilities. He launches firebombs at the building, attacked several vehicles in the parking lot, even attempted to blow up a propane tank. When the police engaged him, though it was unclear who fired the shots first, no one was injured, but given what he was armed with, nothing left but a miracle. Hundreds of Antifa supporters weighed in on the group's Facebook page with various words of encouragement. Rest in power, comrade. He was truly a hero to us all. Meanwhile, Ted Cruz and a senator named Cassidy have introduced a resolution to take action against Antifa. The resolution comes after a self-described member of Antifa attacked an Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in Tacoma, Washington, over the weekend, and after conservative journalist Andy Ngo was brutally attacked in Portland by an Antifa mob. Antifa is a terrorist organization composed of hateful, intolerant radicals who pursue their extreme agenda through aggressive violence. Time and again, their actions have demonstrated their central purpose is to inflict harm on those who oppose their views, Senator Cruz tweeted. Like any terrorist organization, they choose to pursue their political ends through violence, fear, and intimidation. They must be stopped. I'm proud to introduce this resolution with Senator Bill Cassidy to properly identify what Antifa are, namely domestic terrorists. Meanwhile, Republican support for Trump rises after racially charged tweets. Support for U.S. President Trump increased slightly among Republicans after he lashed out in racially charged attack on former minority Democrat Congresswoman, a Reuters Ipsos public opinion poll shows. The national survey conducted Monday and Tuesday after Trump told the lawmakers they should go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came. With regard to Ocasio-Cortez, that would be Brooklyn. Showed his net approval among Republicans rose by 5 percentage points to 72% compared to a similar poll the earlier week. Trump, seeking re-election, has lost support, however, with Democrats and independents. Among independents, about 3 of 10 said they approved of him, down from 4 of 10 a week ago. His net approval, the percentage who approved minus the percentage who disapproved, dropped by 2%. But this is before they refused to condemn the Antifa violence, and the situation, I think, is only going to get better for Trump and worse for the Democrats. Don, I know you want to make some observations since this happened in Tacoma. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really do, because I didn't even hear about it last weekend until I heard about it on Tucker Carlson on Monday. It wasn't broadcast up here in the news. Most people up here don't know about it. That might be good that the news suppress it to not expose or give them more publicity. But that was quite shocking here, and I think, I think that Antifa's theme there, I guess, isn't their motto that we got to stomp out hatred and violence? That's the motto that's going to work. Oh, sure.
Well, they're a fascist organization pretending to be anti-fascist.
That's right. It's hypocritical.
Well, they're also seriously mentally disturbed. They're coming from social environments, and I've said this before. We study this at Heritage Foundation, and the social science data is incontrovertible. When you look at the statistical analysis of homes and broken families and broken marriages, and then you have cohabitation, you have drugs, you have alcohol abuse, you have all sorts of dysfunctionalities. You create human beings with enormous dysfunctionality and rebellion and all sorts of other issues. That is the very definition of what the Antifa people represent. And you see that on their faces. You see that when they dress in this revolutionary baklava sense of, or whatever it is, sense of revolutionary fighting, and they beat up journalists and they beat up women and they punch girls and they pour pepper spray into people's eyes. That's not bold and courageous. That's thuggish and that's cowardly. That's the mob mentality. But if anything is going to trigger a conservative uprising, like Trump said, they don't pick fights with bikers for Trump or former military or police people or anything like that. They pick on, the weak elements of society. So Omar and Ocasio-Cortez and all these Democrats that don't condemn, including the media. I mean, you've got Don Lemon of MSNBC or CNN or whatever he's at, and the other guy, Cuomo. These people are just showing their scum side. They really are the garbage of humanity, just like Antifa. They're, you're judged by the company you keep. So this is, again, one of the fracture points of the Civil War in America that I think is going to be erupting. It's interesting to note this, Jim. They had some statistical revelations that gonorrhea, syphilis, and other sexually transmitted diseases have increased vastly in the United States and in Europe, and Iceland in particular, and other places. And it's important to recognize that these sexually transmitted diseases, for the most part, are practices that Democrats, leftists, liberals, anarchists, the Antifa type, engage in. They're the ones who have this lifestyle and this behavioral pattern. It is not church attending conservative Republicans or libertarians for the most part. Libertarians, they're a little bit off, but for the most part, the conservatives don't have that. They're not part of that degradation or affliction. And it's important to understand that, because with those sexually transmitted diseases, you have an increase in mental breakdowns, mental problems. The brain itself is deteriorated. Al Capone died of syphilis, and it went into madness. So I anticipate, as the sexually transmitted diseases really spread within this community of anarchists and communists and leftists and the rebellious types, they're all going to go into worse conditions of madness because of the physiological breakdown that these diseases cause, similar to the Alzheimer's and dementia that we see in Capitol Hill, and they will become worse and worse and worse, and more, I mean, like a dog going into madness. You think the dog is normal, then it gets snappy, then it gets vicious, then it goes stark raving mad. I think we're at the part where Antifa are just about to go stark raving mad, and that'll probably be after 2020 when Trump wins again, and then we're in for some serious bloodshed. But hey, we know who wins in the end: conservatives. Jim?
Well, Scott, it's very disturbing that in Portland they can be attacking the public and the police stand by and do nothing about it. To me, that's utterly shocking. I don't know what the situation is in Seattle. Don may be able to illuminate us, but I hope the law enforcement will take a more responsible role in protecting the public.
Well, I sure hope so. I haven't seen much action along that line, though, but I guess it's going to be fine. And as far as you mentioned Cuomo, Scott, and you can't tell me that Cuomo, who is on CNN, has an independent thought from the Cuomo who's the governor of New York. They're brothers, and I think that's the way it is. The news and the government are married, and you only get one side there, and you're getting, I think, the true side here. But we don't need to have any ties to kiss up to or obey. We're just looking for the truth, the harsh truth, and we're telling it to you, folks. This is it. Share this and get the Moonrock books that have been banned because we're telling the truth.
Meanwhile, Ilhan Omar is in a very peculiar predicament, stonewalling her hometown paper on a marriage controversy. This verges on the bizarre. Yeah. Democratic Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar has allegedly been uncooperative with her hometown paper's effort to get to the bottom of accusations that she committed marriage fraud, according to the paper's political editor. Omar's brief congressional career has been dogged by accusations, which she has denied, that she married a male relative, possibly her brother. Omar and her current husband, Ahmed Hersi, filed joint tax returns while Omar was married to another man, Ahmed Elmi, Minnesota campaign finance officials said. Omar and her family have made it difficult for journalists to find out the truth about her marriage. Minnesota Star Tribune editor Kevin Dates told PolitiFact in an interview Thursday. Our public record searches determined that in at least one period after she married Elmi, all three, Omar, Elmi, and Hearst, used the same address in Minnesota. This raises questions about the nature of the relationship if she's living with both the person she's married to and her eventual husband. Dems decry Omar resolution defending Israeli boycott, but here I agree with Omar. She may have married her brother officially to bring him into the country. I have that impression, but I think on this BDS, she's absolutely standing tall, and I agree with her. High-profile Democrats are decrying a controversial resolution from Representative Ilhan Omar affirming the right to boycott Israel, even as they rally behind her and three other first-term congresswomen attacked by President Trump. Omar proposed a resolution earlier this week in a bid to push back against U.S. laws banning the Israel boycotts, which are completely unconstitutional and wrong. The text of the measure affirms the right of Americans to organize boycotts of foreign countries. She's completely constitutional and right. While the resolution doesn't explicitly name Israel or the pro-Palestinian boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, she told media outlets that the resolution concerns the Jewish state. We are introducing a resolution to really speak about the American values that support and believe in our ability to exercise our First Amendment right in relation to boycotting. But Democrats who rushed to her defense this week after Trump's Twitter attack that critics have called racist have once again been put in an awkward spot by her criticism of Israel. Earlier this year, many Democrats condemned comments from Omar deemed to be anti-Semitic, but then any criticism of Israel is being treated as though it were anti-Semitic, even though it has nothing to do with the race or ethnicity of those who are being criticized, which are the policies and actions of the government of Israel. Now, several members are making clear they're not on board with her BDS resolution. Pro-Israeli Democrats, meanwhile, proposed an anti-BDS resolution that passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee Wednesday, accusing the boycott movement against the Jewish state of promoting principles of collective guilt, mass punishment, and group isolation. Because the Israelis are actually being very sensitive and reacting to the effect of the boycott movement, which I support 100%. Scott.
Well, you know, Omar had a lot of good things that she seemed to be full of promise for, and I think there's some legitimate grievances and concerns that people show, including Omar, about Israeli Zionist militant Likud extermination of the Palestinian people, of shutting off their power and their water and turning the areas that they live in into bombed out shelters of ruins and crumbling concrete. That's a reality of what Israel does to some of those people. They're the most fascist of nations, and they're no friend of Christians, no friend of the United States. They're the most violent sort of personality, and you know, have a good show, but behind the curtain, they are the Israeli, not all Jewish people are Israeli people, but a lot of the government and intelligence and military forces are very, very sickening in their treatment. So Ilhan Omar had some gravity and credentials there, but she ruins it and throws it all out and destroys herself when she goes on this ranting tirade against white people, white men, as if America is a racist country, as if you know, all of these asinine things that they say about, you know, America and anti-ICE border, that loses everybody in the nation. If she had kept to, look, I don't want foreign nations coming in and lobbying American politicians or setting American policy. I don't like people coming into the Department of Treasury sanctioning agencies, conferences, and persons from Iran just because there is a anti-Iranian Zionist bent. That's an abuse of power in the American government. That's an abuse of the Constitution. She didn't say all of that. She kind of went through a little bit, and then she went on this rant of anti-Americanism, and that's the quickest way to lose everybody. And you're surrendering to you know, to emotion, and it's sad because I don't think she'll be elected again. I don't think Artizio Cortez will be elected again, because this, again, socialism, this bent of rabid socialism is not what the American people are going to engage in. This country still has enough people that reject this anti-American, anti-borders, anti-ICE delusion, and they also reject socialism because they recognize there's still enough people around that fought socialism, fought communism, fought the idea that a tyrannical government state can come in and control people's lives and their economic talents and confiscate their wealth and redistribute it as the enlightened bureaucrats on high deem appropriate. There are enough Americans that have lived through and seen that, and they will not tolerate it in America. So these idiot children like Cortez and Omar, who get up there thinking that they can, you know, put cat shit into a candy bar wrapper and persuade Americans to eat it, they're under their own poison. They're out of their minds, and I think Americans are going to express that in the voting bloc, Jim.
I got to tell you, Scott, I like having them around. They make things very interesting. It's exciting. It's kind of fun. And often they're making, you know, Omar has been so clear about certain issues that I've applauded her. You've heard me do that here on our own show.
Right.
Ocasio-Cortez is so charming in a certain way. I mean, it's almost a function of the degree of hypocrisy she displays, because she's really from a very wealthy family and background, and yet poses as a champion of the poor. Not that we haven't had American politicians who represented a similar often viewed as incongruency. Jack Kennedy came from a wealthy elite family, but he was indeed a bona fide champion of the poor, as was Bobby. I like having him around. You may be correct about their fate in 2020. I'd be a bit more optimistic, however. I think because they're swinging a lot of weight, even though they're relatively inexperienced, I think their constituency may support him. I think the gravest risk to Omar is this family thing, this marrying her brother. That's not going to go down well, I think, even in a Muslim community.
Well, they also said in that story that she fraudulently piggybacked on the other family that came over here. So she snuck in, basically riding in their lifeboat to come to the United States. So she stole or borrowed or fraudulently represented herself as a person that she really wasn't. Tucker did a whole analysis of that. And it was
yeah. Well,
that's right.
I like her. I really like her.
In some ways, yes, she's pretty good in some ways.
It's very funny how much I like this person, and yet she's doing some things that I condemn. And it's a very interesting situation. Meanwhile, and this ought to be highly alarming to Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren surges past Kamala Harris and Joe Biden in the Golden State. A California poll of Democrat primary voters has Senator Elizabeth Warren surging past favorite daughter, Senator Kamala Harris, and former Vice President Joe Biden in the Golden State ahead of the second debates coming at the end of July. That's 29th and 30th, as I recall. Political debates, the 30th and the 31st, actually, it's a Tuesday and
Wednesday, Thursday.
Tuesday and a Wednesday. I've got it marked. Here are the polls. 2020 California primary. Warren, 25%. Harris, 20%. Biden, 20%. Sanders, 16%. Buttigieg, 8%. O'Rourke, 2%. Booker, 1%. Klobuchar, 1%. Very significant. The fact that Warren is leading Harris and Biden in California, one of the biggest states in the union, an important early battleground state, should the race last longer than just Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, is particularly important and interesting. It suggests that Harris, who led a different survey out this week in California by 1 point over Warren, is having difficulty locking up her home state. It also suggests Biden is on the decline in a big way in key Democratic states and will need to lock up some solid victories ahead of California in states like Iowa and South Carolina if he has a chance to win the nomination. South Carolina polling has Biden with consistent, strong leads over the rest of the field because it has a larger percentage of black voters who are sticking with Biden, I think, out of loyalty to Barack Obama, even though Obama and Michelle have not endorsed him. The previous California survey from Change Research had Biden down in fourth place at 17%, Harris out front at 23%, Warren right behind at 22%, where Sanders came in third at 20%. While Warren is out in front in the new Capital Weekly poll, there are also some interesting data points when it comes to the survey respondent second choice. With respect to Harris and Warren, Harris seems to come in second in a lot of polls, which suggests she may be a strong contender for the nomination. Meanwhile, congressional testimony. Google gave Hillary millions of votes. 15 million more are at risk for 2020. This is very, very serious. At a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Google and censorship through search engines, Dr. Robert Epstein, who researches the impact of Google, informed the hearing upward of 15 million votes are in jeopardy in the 2020 election. During his testimony, Epstein told Ted Cruz that in 2016, Google gave at least 2.6 million votes to Democratic Hillary Clinton through bias in search results. Notice that's the margin by which she alleges to have won the popular vote. He stressed that's a lower number. When questioned further by Cruz, he gave a more concise answer. The range is between 2.6 and 10.4 million votes, depending on how aggressive they were in using the techniques I've been studying, such as the search engine manipulation effect, the search suggestion effect, the answer bot effect, and a number of others. They control these, and no one can counteract them. These are not competitive. These are tools they have at their disposal exclusively. Wow. Cruz was shocked responding, if any headline comes out of this hearing, that should be it. Epstein Warren.
Yes.
In 2020,
Right.
you can bet that all of these companies are going to go all out. The methods they're using are invisible. They're subliminal. They're more powerful than any effects I've ever seen in behavioral sciences. And I've been doing this for about 40 years. Scott.
Wow. Something else.
Yeah, that is the true rise of the totalitarian state, is the internet shutting down our freedom of speech and filtering and dissecting and totally anesthetizing the freedom of speech and the discussions which are necessary for this 1984 government speak. This has to be met in legal action. This has to be met against YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and court, as we've all suffered personally, our YouTube channels being shut down. I saved the video, Jim, of when that organization that Lenny Posner created or aided, that was going around shutting down websites. I saw the CNN Business video, and they had my website being portrayed on the CNN Business video of this whatever that group was. You'll recall.
HONR.
Yeah, and the woman says, "Let's look at this guy, Army PSYOP. That seems interesting." That was my website on YouTube. So here I got CNN Business with the Honor Network focusing on me because I was putting out videos with Jim Fetzer and the false flag attack of Sandy Hook and the New Zealand shooting false flag attack. All of that is aiding and contributing to crimes, and it needs to be met in court. There needs to be class actions filed, and I know there will be. But it's also important to recognize Trump has convened conservatives in the White House and held meetings to discuss this thing. So I think you're going to recognize a pushback by conservatives, and it's a wonderful political caption to dominate and brand is Trump represents freedom in every way in America, freedom of speech, freedom of the internet, not the fascist, Democrat, totalitarian groupthink. And if you say anything that is politically incorrect or may even suggest or resemble anything politically incorrect, we're going to shut you down and try and hurt you. That's not what America stands for, and that's where the government comes in. That's where the whole notion of Leviathan, as Hobbes wrote, you create government to step in and stop these abuses against you, or else it is civil war. So I think Trump convening these conservative voices like Alex Jones and others, and the Salt and Pepper and all these other people, he's bringing in a coalition of real conservative internet voices. He'll use the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, to file actions and fines against YouTube and Google and elsewhere. And I think you'll see this turn into a very significant political battle space in the next year. And of course, Kamala Harris and Warren and Biden, I seriously don't think anybody with a brain thinks any of these people can defeat Donald Trump. Not because of the power of his personality, not because he gets up in a stage and he dominates and he cajoles and he inspires and enlivens everybody, which he does, but because they are so far worse than him. They are so angry and vicious and bitter and about reparations and about Jussie Smollett relating to Kamala Harris. There's so much controversy with these people that Americans just can smell the cow manure emanating from all of their dispositions. The only one that had a hope is Tulsi Gabbard. She was just on The View this morning, by the way, so it'll be interesting to see what she says. But all of these other people, as long as Trump does not get us into a war and does not make the foolish thought that he can pick a fight with Iran and continue in his election as George Bush did, he's dead wrong. This is not George Bush in 2004, and he's not running against John Kerry. Trump is running as a peace candidate, and now he's perceived as a hypocrite. And if he doesn't keep us out and honor his original promise, then the candidate who stands up and says, vote for me if you want peace, and I will remove us from all over these world territories. I will end the war tomorrow. Vote for me. That person will win the election, because Americans are so sick and tired of this hypocrisy and this endless war. It's lasted 19 years, and they were promised it was going to be done in 5. So I think that is going to be the key issue that the election is going to be hinged on, as it was in 2018. That's one of the reasons that he lost the House. Jim?
Well, Google manipulated as much as 76 million votes in 2018, Scott. Here, I agree with you about Tulsi. I think she is the dark horse here. I think she is the one who's going to emerge from the pack to be a real contender. Here we have the Twitter CEO maxing out his donations at Tulsi, and the conspiracy machine kicks into overdrive. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has donated thousands of dollars to anti-war Democrat presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard. And Twitter users and mainstream media journalists are rather ironically up in arms about it. He may just be in love. I think she's just wonderful. Dorsey gave the max of $5,600 at Gabbard's campaign a day after her appearance during the first Democratic presidential campaign in June, according to the FEC filing reported by BuzzFeed. Of all the Democratic contenders for 2020, the Hawaiian congresswoman has been a favorite punching bag for U.S. journalists who've accused her of being pro-Russia due to her anti-interventionist foreign policy. That's as pro-American as you can get. She's also been consistently targeted for meeting with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad during a 2017 trip to the war-torn country. The media deriding her as an Assad apologist, where they won't even admit he's a democratically elected president of Syria who has the support of 80% of the Syrian people. BuzzFeed's own story on Dorsey's donation smacks of disbelief, claiming Gabbard is probably best known for a visit to the Syrian dictator when he's not, despite the fact that she is obviously well known for other things like being a high-profile congresswoman, an Iraq war veteran, and not to mention a Hindu. Later, BuzzFeed noted Dorsey also scandalously faved a bunch of tweets from and about Gabbard. Well, he likes her. He's entitled to promote her. Other media reports were equally incredulous. A Gizmodo article on the FEC filings branded Gabbard an odd duck and Dorsey a weird dude. How silly is that? An award-winning investigative journal even claimed the donations were proof that Jack is virulently homophobic because Twitter is apparently always banning gay people. The link to alleged homophobia stems from anti-gay comments Gabbard made decades ago before changing her views and running up a very pro-LGBT record in Congress. A New York-based soccer agent theorized that Dorsey's donation made perfect sense since the Twitter CEO is all in for Trump. And so naturally he would support the Russian-backed Democrat too. I mean, this is bizarre beyond belief. Lunatic. Meanwhile, feigning interest in arms control to kill a new start, see if you can find the flaw in the Trump administration new arms control initiative. President Trump is sending a high-level delegation to meet with Russian counterparts in Geneva this week to pursue an arms control treaty that for the first time would cap the nuclear arsenals not just of the two largest powers, but of China as well. Mr. Trump broached the idea with President Putin during their meeting in Osaka last month, and has also signaled his ambition for a three-way accord to President Xi Jinping of China. Administration officials said Monday. Russia has expressed interest, China has not. China has no interest in being part of a trilateral arms control agreement. Their nuclear arsenal is much smaller. They'd have no reason to take part in negotiations that have traditionally been between the U.S. and Russia. China also sees the administration decision to quit the INF treaty, that's the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty, as an additional reason not to negotiate with the U.S. Chinese officials have categorically rejected the idea, regardless of how it is negotiated, citing, among other things, Mr. Trump's decision to pull out of INF as evidence the United States cannot be trusted. The premise and basis for trilateral arms control negotiations do not exist at all, and China will never participate in them. You can ask for a more definitive rejection than that. Instead of pushing on this closed and locked door, the Trump administration ought to be engaging Russia on an extension of a new start, but they've made no effort to do it. The article notes the administration refusal to extend the treaty. Mr. Trump also signaled it's not interested in renewing the New START Treaty of 2010, that expires in 19 months, despite Russia's declaration desire to do so. Scott.
Well, you know, why would Russia trust anything that the United States signs its name to, given the JCPOA debacle and the tearing of that up? Why would any nation trust anything that the United States signs its name to, given the overthrow of Libya and you know, all these promises about democracy and freedom of human rights? All of that is complete lies and propaganda, and is a deception operation, because you had Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and Victoria Nuland orchestrate the coup d'etat, the overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya, recognized as the jewel of Africa. Many people have done exhaustive analytics into Libya and its departure from the Rothschild global banking system, its translation of the natural resources and the aqueducts, and everything about Libya was looking very, very nice. And here you have the overthrow of Libya with Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And James and Joanne Moriarty, who were wonderful Americans, were on the ground in Libya and witnessed all of this, and witnessed the U.S. and the French, Sarkozy and Cameron and others waging this war against Libya, as well as John McCain and Lindsey Graham and others taking bags of money full of millions of dollars for photo shoots with the Wahhabi Salafist terrorists. So the U.S. is a complete schizophrenic Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which means the signature on any piece of paper really can't be trusted. And it makes me very sick and sad to have to say that, because it's an expression of the American people. We're getting the government and the people and the policies that we're allowing. We're not standing up against it. We're not shouting it down. We're not kicking them out of office and putting real men in leadership positions. We've got these scumbag game show host, castrated fools. And it's very alarming when you hear things about the START Treaty, because I see the United States military-industrial complex and these Zionist elements exercising America's nuclear arsenal in the near future. That's why they're pulling out of this treaty, is to have the flexibility to use nuclear weapons. And they could use it against Iran. They could use it against, I think, China. They could use it against Russia. They could use it in small levels. Well, it's just a little half of a nuclear bomb. It's not a real nuclear bomb. It only destroys a quarter of the country, not as much as Nagasaki. That sort of thinking is going to destroy this country. That sort of thinking is going to implode our entire country in history. So
the most solemn agreements ever entered into by this nation with the Soviet Union on the eve of its dissolution have been grossly violated by seeking to convert the newly independent nations into NATO states and putting, weaponry right on the border of Russia. Why would any nation in the world take the United States seriously? Scott, it is sad, tragic to say, but the word of the United States in international agreements means nothing. Nothing at all. Yeah, Don, I know we're on the verge. I know you have a few words of thought here for us, please.
Oh yeah, I'm afraid to expand on your words. I meant to say when I talk about the Cuomo brothers, both those brothers are dual citizens, Israeli and American too. And so that's another thing in the mix between government and media and allegiance. Who can you trust in the country? And that's why nobody trusts us at all. And also, we're seeing it when truth is politicized, all is lost. You can't believe a word that the American media says. And so that's not the state that we're supposed to be in, folks. And we're countering it right here on Truth versus News. This is for, again, July 22nd. This is going to be the week that Mueller testifies and opens up a big can of worms. This could be quite the time to stick around. Oh, and I got to let you know that I'm broadcasting here from Seattle, and we're having fun and heat here, and it's going to get hot everywhere. So I want to stay tuned for the second half of the show. It's going to come up as soon as I can get it together here. So thank you so much for watching, folks, and we'll be back.